Bonjour, mesdames, messieurs. Je m'appelle...
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Larry Leverman. In the name of the International Research Center and the Canadian International Innovation Center, I wish you a warm welcome.
See such a large gathering to this IDRC CG joint-sponsored event, and we're grateful to IDRC for providing this superb venue. I would like to recognize some of our guests here with us today. The Ambassador of Italy, His Excellency Gian Lorenzo Cornado, the Ambassador of Switzerland, Son Excellence Beat Nobs, the Ambassador de Benin, l'Ambassadeur de Benin, Son Excellence
His Excellency Kuntanji,
representatives from the embassies of Spain, France, Germany, Russia, and of course Italy. We also have amongst us today some former Canadian ambassadors, the former Canadian ambassador to the OAS, Costa Rica, and Chile, Paul Durand, former Canadian ambassador to Finland, Craig MacDonald, former Canadian ambassador to Switzerland, Robert Colette, and I'm also pleased to welcome the director of Norman Patterson School of International Affairs, Carleton University, Dr. Dane Rowlands. And last but not least, it's a great pleasure for me to recognize the presence of the Honorable Francesca Lamarca, the member of the Italian Parliament for the constituency of North and Central America. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to invite CG's Director of the Global Economy Program, Dr. Domenico Lombardi, to say a few words. Domenico.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Senator, for being with us today. I thought what I would do is to offer some remarks explaining what we do at CG and how this might be helpful and hopefully relevant for you, Undersecretary, and for the work that your colleagues do at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Rome. CG was established as a public-private partnership about 15 years ago. At the time, a private donor, Jim Basile, the founder and at the time a co-CEO of BlackBerry, teamed up with the federal government of Canada and the province of Ontario to establish what is CG today. And unlike many other think tanks you may have come across, CG is quite different in at least two respects. In the first place, CG places a unique emphasis on governance. And I think a lot of the issues you are going to raise in your remarks, Undersecretary, Brexit, the future of the European Union, the migration and the refugee crisis do speak to that, to the interaction of economic, political factors on the one hand, and of course governance-related issues. And the second feature is the fact that we are a Canadian institution headquartered in Ontario, but we do have a global scope with ongoing research projects, a scholarly presence, and partners in all regions of the world, including Europe, Senator, and as well as Italy. Talking about partners, let me acknowledge the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs, Professor Harman, with whom we have been organizing this event. And of course, I wish to acknowledge IDRC, a long-standing friend of CG, with whom we have partnered on a number of projects. And most of all, without preempting what you are going to say, Jean, I know that IDRC has worked for over 40 years on issues such as migration, integration, again, aspects on which the Undersecretary will touch upon in his remarks. So I'll stop here. And Senator, thank you for being with us today.
You stole my role. Et maintenant, c'est un grand...
And now it's a great pleasure for me to ask for the President of the International Development Research Center, Dr. Jean Lebel, to introduce our guests of honor. Thank you. Jean Lebel.
Merci, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
You know, I was changing already my note to say thank you, Domenico, but I haven't looked at the program. You were coming back. So, you know, my peoples are always right, you know, when they script me. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Ambassador Cornado from Italy, as well as Senator Vedova, welcome to IDRC, the Canadian International Development Research Center. It is our great pleasure today to co-host this event with CG, the Center for International Governance Innovation, for International Governance and Innovation. Domenico, thank you. And please carry my words of thanks to your president and always friend of IDRC, Rohinton Medara, who has been vice president and used to be my boss for 8 years here at IDRC. Yeah, now it's yours. If you need any advice, you can come and see me afterwards. I want to also thank Carleton's University Center for European Study and Akim Asman that is with us today, and many people in the room also coming from Carleton University. There are headsets available at the back for simultaneous translation. I will say a few words in French, but will also reverse to English. L'Union Européenne.
The European Union is at a crossroads. Its member states are now facing a long list of difficult issues, in particular a slow economic uptake, conflicts at their borders, and huge migratory influx as we've seen these last few months of last year. And given all of that, we also must think of, if we can call it that, and to top it all off, the 23rd of June next, the citizens of the United Kingdom will decide by referendum whether they shall or not remain members of the Union. It's called the Brexit. A huge issue. The future of the European Union is important for Europeans, Canadians, and, of course, for developing countries as well. Our main audience for our work here at IDRC.
Member states are the largest donor of official development assistance in the world. In 2014, that amounted to 58.2 billion euros or $84 billion Canadian. That is a significant contribution to improving the lives of people and adds an extra layer to any debates about the future of Europe and the European Union. Europe also been at the forefront of the refugee crisis as millions of people flee conflict in Syria and elsewhere across the Middle East and North Africa. Here in Canada, we are proud of welcoming more than 25,000 Syrian refugees since November 2015. But I think it's nothing vis-à-vis what I've witnessed in Europe in November as I was visiting Sweden, the Netherlands, Norway, as well as France. And particularly in Sweden and Norway, I was really astonished by the numbers of people that were really arriving on a daily basis within this country. And I am not familiar with the situation in Italy, but I know this is creating a huge pressure on this country. And last year, it's estimated that it's 1 million people that cross border. It's probably more than that in Europe. And that's only a small fraction of the migrant crisis, because as a sideline, yesterday we were hosting a workshop here with experts. It's 60 million worldwide people, 60 million people worldwide that are either displaced in their country, that are refugees, that are without legal status, citizenship, they are citizens of nowhere, or they are asylum seeker. And these are the number of 2014, and as the UNHCR will publish soon its 2015 number, this is going up. So this situation in Europe is a situation seen elsewhere. We're concentrating on Europe today, but it's something that we cannot leave aside. And at IDRC, you know, we are contributing, as Domenico was mentioning, to research on these aspects of migration flow and how they are impacting country. Currently, I can tell you a very topical look that we have is at the situation in Lebanon and in Jordan with Syrian refugee. Those of you familiar with the situation, you know, it's almost 40% of the population now in Lebanon that is composed of refugees. This is creating huge, huge burden on system. Education, health, water. These people are not in camps. They are, you know, mixing with the population. And we are contributing our little intellectual resources and convening actor from Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon to find solution. We are also looking at open education. How do we take care of half of the population of those Syrian refugees age 16 and lower that don't go to school currently? That's 250,000 kids that don't have access to school. If we don't look at this now, these citizens of the future will have no education, and what will be their future? It will have an impact on Europe, it will have an impact on Canada, and it will have an impact worldwide. The refugee crisis is complex, and this is one of the issues that the European Union is facing. The Senator will talk to us about this. And I think the Senator, Benedetto Della Vedova, and my apologies for the mispronunciation, Senator, is an exceptional guest, as he is a veteran politician and has been also a commentator in Italian numbers of media. He currently serves as Undersecretary of State at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Among his responsibility, there's the relation with Asia-Pacific countries, Canada, Mexico, particular attention of internationalization of Italian company, economic and financial matter, particularly in relation to the G8 and the G20 mechanism, something that Domenico knows extremely well. But not only is he currently the Undersecretary, he has been also a European politician serving at the European Parliament from 1999 to 2004, where he served among many committees, on the one on economic and monetary affairs, on industry, research, and energy, as well as on the relation with the South Asia community and particularly in the ASEAN country. He is finally a researcher, has served as a researcher at the Bocconi Institute as well as the Lombardi Research Institute and the University Cattolica in Milan, playing different roles related to economy, energy, agriculture. And I cannot think of a better person to talk today about the issue of Brexit, the issue of migrant, the issue of security in Europe. Senator, it's a pleasure to have you with us. It's a pleasure to welcome you also jointly with CG and with Carleton University. If you would like to take the floor, please, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a great honor for me to be here tonight. I go straight to the point. A still fragile economy recovery, the spreading of conflicts near the EU's external borders, the huge inflow of migrants fleeing both from war zones and from economic hardship, and the terrorist threat are seriously challenging the European project. Public opinions in the European Union are less eager to acknowledge the benefits and the merits of the European Union. Nationalist and populist movements are on the rise in many EU member states, whether or not part of the Eurozone, while the traditional left-right fault line is now less relevant than the hiatus between opposed winners and losers of the globalization, between who thinks in open terms and who thinks in closed terms. Populism is nourished by jobless and fears of de-welfarization. The influx of migrants, coupled with the terrorist threat, is worsening the perception in our public opinion that our lifestyle is at risk. The populist rhetoric adds fuel to the fire. In this difficult context, the Brexit referendum looks to many as a definitive proof that Europe is weak at a time when its neighbourhood is more turbulent. To try and avert Brexit, the EU accepted to negotiate a compromise that is still unsatisfactory for Eurosceptics in Britain, but has opened the possibility of other member states asking a differentiated treatment regardless of the outcome of the British referendum, which is very uncertain. In my opinion, the EU was too generous in negotiating with Mr. Cameron. In fact, the referendum is ultimately not about fine-tuning of Britain's involvement with the EU, but rather about a fundamental choice between to stay or to leave the European Union. It is unlikely that any achievable compromise would persuade Eurosceptics to choose to stay. If the majority of British voters will decide to leave the EU on June 23rd, the consequences will be felt across the continent, but, as the IMF pointed out, Brexit would pose major challenges also for the UK. What will be the next step after Brexit for Scotland or Northern Ireland, where the bonds with the EU are stronger? Today, the debate in England is centred on the need to regain more control at the national level. But what degree of control can we seek as a single European country, even a large one, on problems that have a global scale? Take migrations, a global and lasting challenge. Italy, facing the problem since its inception, was alone in advocating for a common European response until the flows of the Balkan route in 2015 led to awareness in Europe and to a politically courageous decision by Chancellor Merkel. Today, while humanitarian aid is a priority and Italy saved roughly 150,000 lives in the Mediterranean in 2015, a refugee policy based on post-war European shared values and on a demographic reality check is required to cope with a trend that seems bound to last for several decades. The EU has undertaken a revision of its migration and asylum policy to promote more integration among member states on the basis of shared responsibility and solidarity. The European Agenda on Migration is a comprehensive strategy which takes into account both the external and internal dimension of migration. As far as external relations are concerned, cooperating with third countries of origin and transit of migration flows is the key to deal with the root causes of this phenomenon. The recent agreement with Turkey is a part of the approach the EU is pursuing in dealing with the migration challenge. Italy supports it, but it would be disingenuous to say that cooperation with Turkey will solve the problem. Increasingly, migrants are taking the central Mediterranean route, and those arriving to Italy's shores have increased by 25% this year, of course. No? If you block the route through Turkey, Greece and Balkans, the refugee will keep the Mediterranean route. It's simple to understand. And I want to thank for your remarks about Syria and Lebanon and Jordan. We share a common commitment in trying to avoid the lost generation of refugees, young people, lost especially in terms of education. And we have to double our efforts to provide education for young generation displaced. Many of them are children of very well-educated parents, university degrees many times, but now are living where no education is provided to them. And this is a risk for the future, because they will try to reach Europe, first of all, but also because without education it's quite difficult to find a job, and the eradication is at the corner. The Italian government is therefore opposing proposing its contribution to an EU strategy for an external action on migration. The Migration Compact we proposed last week that is under discussion alongside with other proposals, but is under discussion these days in the European Commission. The Migration Compact builds on the results of the La Valletta summit of last November and essentially deals with cooperation with countries of origins and transit in Africa. The strategy is based on investment projects by the European Union, facilitating the access for African countries to financial markets and developing legal migration opportunities on one hand. On the other hand, more border controls, cooperation on returns and readmission to be funded also through common EU migration bonds. On one hand, we have to enhance our cooperation with African countries. If we want, on the other hand, ask help and cooperation to secure the borders and in the readmission project, because it's quite easy to land in Europe, and it's very difficult for us to send back people that are not entitled to remain as refugee or entitled of humanitarian protection in Europe. And we need cooperation with country of origin and transit to set them back. But to have cooperation, you must provide help and help for development, help for security and so on. As to the international dimension, the main focus is now on a common European asylum system in view of more solidarity among member states as to the protection of asylum seekers. Now, according to the so-called Dublin rule, if you reach one member state and you are entitled of asylum according to the European Union standard, you receive asylum in the state where you reach Europe, but you have to remain in that state. If you reach Italy, you received asylum from Italian authorities, but then you can't move to Germany, to France, to Ireland, to Austria. You have to remain in Italy or in Greece. So most of them arriving in Greece or in Italy intended to arrive in Europe, and their goal are Germany. Most of them want to go to Germany or to France to find relatives or friends, and we have to take them prisoner in Italy, even if they are refugees, they are entitled for humanitarian protection, but you have to remain. This is a very big problem, because they know that, and as they see the Italian coasts, the first things for them is, okay, I saved my life. The second one is, I have to do everything not to be registered in Italy if the goal is another EU member state. The EU Commission submitted proposal to the membership on April 6th with two different options, one simply incremental and one more innovative regarding the Dublin Agreement, the Dublin rules. Italy's goals are to save Schengen, an essential part of our single market. Schengen means that there are no border between EU member states that enter in the Schengen Agreement. Not each one European member states entered Schengen Agreement yet, but between Italy and France, Italy and Slovenia, or Italy and Austria, virtually there is no border till now. And this is very important not only for the free movement of the people, but is very important for the economy. Italy's goals are to save Schengen from attempts to build walls along national border as in the case of the border between Italy and Austria, and to reform the Dublin regulation. Dublin regulations stating that the country, I said it before, so it's no use to repeat, a large share of migrants come from sub-Saharan countries. The stabilization of Libya, a main priority for my government, is critical in many ways. As I said before, securing the East European border with Turkey is a great achievement if it will function, and it seems to function so far. But of course, push people to find another way to reach Europe. And Libya, till few weeks ago until now, was and still is a free corridor for human beings trafficking coming from the Middle East, from the Pakistan, from Bangladesh, many of them from Afghanistan, but most of them from Horn of Africa and from Sub-Saharan Africa. The human being traffickers have a free corridor, free of police, free of control, through Libya, and then on boats to coast of Sicily and coast of Italy. The establishment in Tripoli of a government of national agreement led by Mr. al-Sarraj is a game changer, and Italy worked hard and welcomes these developments, as the visit to Tripoli of Foreign Minister Gentiloni showed. And it was unpredictable just 2 months ago that a foreign affairs minister of Italy or of another European big country can visit Tripoli in safety. This happened, and is a big improvement. Not enough, but is a first step forward, very important. But it is only the first step. Addressing the root causes of migration flows require investing in Africa. In this perspective, resettlement policies are gaining momentum, and we strongly recognize the role of Canada, which is a model of solidarity and has recently welcomed about 25,000 Syrian refugees. The example of Canada is being followed in Europe. Italy will resettle more than 2,000 people, mainly, of course, we are receiving 150,000 refugees every year, but we resettle more than 2,000 people, mainly Syrian refugees, before the end of 2017, and is experimenting new solutions such as the Human Corridors project, aimed at welcoming at the beginning 1,000 refugees and particularly vulnerable people. It directly involves civil society. Human Corridors, as you know, means that you pick up people directly in Syria or in Lebanon or in Jordan, and you bring them safely to Europe, and in this case to Italy, not waiting that they will try to cross the Balkan route on the Mediterranean and to reach the Italian coast. That means the European coasts. The situation in Syria remains appalling. Over 18 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance, out of which 13.5 million in Syria and 4.5 million abroad, Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan. Italy's strongly commitment on the humanitarian front, providing relief and also education for refugees, especially in Jordan and Lebanon, and supports the UN-sponsored dialogue. But politically, we should be aware that a polarization around the strengthened Assad regime on one side and ISIL, Daesh on the other, is not a desirable outcome, as it will not encourage migrants and displaced people to return to their homes. A few words on security. A united Europe will be stronger in providing security to its citizens from internal and external threats. We need to identify ways to overcome present difficulties in managing together as a union our security and defense. times arrived for the Union to evolve into a global actor, delivering a truly actionable European global strategy. The EU High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, my previous boss, Federica Mogherini, is working on this strategy that will be submitted to the European Council in June. Jihadist terror in Europe aims to attempt at the coexistence of non-Muslim and Muslim, thereby forcing the radicalization of Europe Muslim and attracting them towards jihadism and Daesh. European political response must be based on the values the European project is rooted in. Xenophobia and hatred will only play in the hands of terrorists. At the same time, we need increased cooperation among intelligence agencies. Ultimately, the EU's global weight lies in its values and in its growth potential and prosperity. Investment, jobs and competitiveness have to be on top of EU's agenda. In the Eurozone, monetary union is blamed for reducing monetary leeway. In reality, currently, the ECB's extraordinary measures are supporting growth in the Eurozone to an extent that the national central bank would not be able to achieve. But on the fiscal side, more coordinated efforts, risk sharing and mutualization are required. That is why the Italian government, which is delivering on a series of ambitious reforms at the national level, has recently put forward a policy agenda for the European Union that aims at boosting its growth potential by enhancing the market's adjustment capacity and flexibility, also through better risk sharing among member states. Structural reforms, ensuring investment, employment, the banking union, the internal market and the labour market are part of this comprehensive policy mix, with strong emphasis on an innovation union that creates jobs for the future. We also propose a common mechanism to mitigate cycle unemployment and its consequences that would help deal with asymmetric shocks. A financial initiative to fund the common management of the European Union's external borders, a fiscal capacity tailored to the task of promoting investments and smoothing the cycle. This function could be managed by a Eurozone financial minister ingrained in the EU Commission, and is under discussion the proposal to have a financial minister for the Eurozone. The Italian government is doing its part at the national level, enacting a number of important reforms designed to improve a business climate, to speed up civil justice, to streamline decision-making and bureaucracy, to strengthen the banking system, and last but not least, to enhance political stability. We passed finally, we passed the bill of the constitutional reforms that will be under referendum in October. It's the first comprehensive constitutional reform after 70 years of the Italian Republic. It's very important, and it will be challenged, the reforms. Also, the Italo-Canadian will vote for the reforms, and I'm pledging them to vote yes to the new constitution. It's important reform because it's a part of the picture to regain more competitiveness to the Italian economy, means also to have more stable, and we are, I think, on the right path, more stable government, more predictable political environment. I'm proud to say that we have huge resources in my country. As I said before, exports, even during the tough crisis in the last 5 years, Italian exports grow constantly at the same pace of German exports, that is a sort of benchmark in the European economy. This testified the competitiveness of our exported-oriented sector. Of course, we must regain growth in domestic demand if we want growth at a reasonable pace. That means 1.52%. In 2016, the Italian GDP growth will be 1.2, 1.5. It depends on the external, from the external factors. That means China, oil price, and so on. But we are back on track, I think we can say, but we have to move speedily on the path of reforms. In conclusion, we should be aware of what is at stake. We need more Europe, not less. We need a better and reformed union, a veritable community which brings prosperity, security and peace instead of national governments indulging in fear and to gain electoral support. The European Union is scattered peace for several decades in Europe, and my personal fear is that if the European Union project will fail, and I'm confident that it won't fail, but if the European Union project will fail, the risk is that Europe will go back 70 years ago. And 70 years ago, before the European Union project started, Europe wasn't a safe place. And European states were fighting each other, and I'm speaking about the Europe of my father, not of my grandfather. So the risk of nationalistic attitude of the European states is still there. And this is one of the reasons that push people like me to fight for the European Union project go on. We need a better European Union, of course. We need less bureaucracy, less red tape, simplification, but we need at national level, at the same time at the European level. But, and this is a difference, and I'm concluding, with some friends in UK, divided European member states, divided, are not stronger, are weaker. My close friend Emma Bonino used to say that we can divide the European member states in two categories. States, member states that are too small to survive in the world nowadays, states that are too small, and states that have not yet understand that are too small. A nationalistic response will not be up to solving today's challenges and will not ensure peace tomorrow. Europe is stronger than we Europeans sometimes understand. And I think that worldwide, starting with some very close and friend and like-minded countries as Canada, need a stronger and unified Europe as a counterpart, both politically and economically. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
And now I would ask Dr. Achim Hurlman, the director of the Institute of European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies at Carleton University, to moderate the question period.
Thank you very much. Undersecretary, that was quite a tour de force through a lot of challenges that Europe is facing, so I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. I suggest that we collect about 3 or 4 for each round of questions. And since we have so many distinguished people here who I'm sure have lots to say, may I ask for very short and pointed questions so that we give as many people as possible
and very short answer
to speak, and then, of course, short answers as well. Yeah. If you could quickly introduce yourself and go to the microphone.
Buongiorno, sono terzo segretario dell'ambasciata russa.
I'm Undersecretary of the Russian Embassy.
Grazie. Recently I saw here in Ottawa your colleague, former Deputy Minister of Defense of Poland, and he reiterated that the so-called southern flank of NATO is less important than the eastern flank. And I would like to ask you whether the Italy's take is different on it, because Italy is obviously on the southern flank of NATO. And what's the Italy's take, and what's the Italy's position on the future of after the Warsaw Summit? Thank you.
The future of?
After the Warsaw Summit.
Okay, let's get 2 or 3 more questions, and then you can, yes, please.
I'm Nant Tandon. I'm a researcher.
University of Ottawa.
I'm at the University of Ottawa.
Cultural anthropology. Thinking ahead to the next 30 or 40 years, if I may, historically minded person who think back to the 3rd and 4th century AD might wonder what will possibly happen when one thinks of the movement of population in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th century AD, which led to the collapse of the Roman Empire at that time. And when we think of the nationalist movement here and the populist movement, I'm giving you food for thought.
Thank you.
Yes. My question is related to the migrations that are taking place and likely to take place in the future. In view of this, and these are expected migrations, how do you see the future of Europe? Do you see it as a multicultural Europe? And do you see the European values as they are traditionally understood threatened by the current and expected inflows into Europe?
I'll give you a chance to respond to those 3, and then we'll take another.
Thank you. About NATO, the Italian position, of course, is that there is no one or second position between East and South. We think that we have Eastern and South border, and of course we are we tried to make it clear, and now it's clear, that we need to secure our border on the south, that many threats comes from the instability in the Mediterranean border of European Union. And NATO itself is operating in the Aegean Sea to try to save lives, and I think that it's important contribution that NATO is giving us. The second and third question is about migration, so I will ask you afterward exactly which kind of advice we can give from the history of Roman emperor. But one is clear that people are moving. In the next 30 years, African population will double. In 2050, Nigeria will be the third country in population after India and China in the order. So we have to focus on Africa as soon as possible. The Italian government is focused on Africa as is trying to make European Union and international Western community, first of all, focus on Africa. We have to invest. It's a great challenge, of course. We have to invest in Africa to help many, not every African country, but many African countries to provide basic services to the people, health, education, to invest in economic development, to try to give the African young generation the chance to live there and to have a job and reasonable income. But we know perfectly that many of them will try to reach Europe or to reach Canada or to reach Australia, wherever they think it's possible to make a better living. So we need a multidimensional approach. For instance, we think, and in the Migration Compact we submitted to the attention of the European Union Commission, is the necessity to provide legal quotas for economic migration to the third countries. Because in our opinion, if you need to cooperate with a country in Africa, for instance, to prevent illegal migration, to readmit people that reach Europe without title to stay there, you must give an option on the other end. And the option is that some of them can apply to reach Europe on legal basis after some training, some language learning before, and then they can reach Europe to search for a job. Now you can reach Europe also legally, also if you have a job, and someone from Italy call you and please come and work for me. It doesn't function. Multicultural, in the European Union we have a big discussion about the best model to provide integration, assimilation, multicultural society, and so on. And Canada is a benchmark for us. Distance help. Probably if from Africa or from Asia you reach Canada, then you stay here. If from Libya you reach Sicily, or if from Morocco or from Algeria you reach Europe, in your mind your country remains the country of origin, so it's more difficult. But we know perfectly that we have to find the best way to integrate migrants into Europe and into European values. That means rule of law, democracy, freedom of speech, equality, gender equality, respect for sexual orientations, and so on. And unfortunately, till now, this is a challenging task. But we have to avoid the, even after terrorist attacks made in the name of Allah, we have to prevent European public opinion to blame all Muslims in Europe because of the terrorist attack, because this is exactly what the terrorists want, to have two Europes, an Islamic Europe and a non-Islamic Europe, and they want to be the paladin of Islamic Europe, of course. We are working on the opposite, to give full European citizenship to the Muslim people, and we have to remember that in Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries we fought a terrible war, religion war, so we must be aware of our history before judging people, and we have to be more prudent. And finally, we have to remember about multicultural and integration that we had in Europe terrorists, Italian terrorists, killing Italian people, politicians, trade union men, judiciary, and now we have people born in Brussels or in Paris, killing people in Paris or in Brussels, and we have to maintain we have to keep calm and fight against terrorists, not fight against a religion.
Thank you. More questions?
Yeah. Normally, I never ask questions, so Senator Vedova.
It's a privilege.
You know, no, it's not a privilege. It's with a guest like you. Let me bring you on a different track. You know, in my intro, I was mentioning the role of the EU in providing international development assistance. Over the last 2 years, we have seen movement, not necessarily reduction, but movement of funds coming back at the national level in Europe to meet the need of the refugee crisis. What's your perspective for the future? Because you were mentioning in your talk, and I fully agree with you, is that we need to look at the problem at the source, not only the problem when they hit the coast of Sicily or they come to Canada. And one of the concerns we have over here or globally in the international development and research world is the money is going to shrink at one point to cover the domestic agenda and tends to forget the international agenda that is also impacting domestically. Thanks.
Okay, are you?
Yes, thank you very much. My question goes to the. Do you think that the British, with the Brexit referendum, are they being too greedy? Are they being too clever by a half? Are they playing a very high-risk game in which they will not only weaken the European Union, but may actually lead to the disintegration of the UK itself? I think not only of Scotland, more particularly of Ireland this year, celebrating 100th years of the Irish Rising, and it may well be through just bumbling along that maybe Ireland will be reunified just as a default collateral outcome of all of this noise. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think I'll take your question and then you in the next round, if that's okay.
Thank you, Senator, for sharing your thoughts tonight with us. And I have a question based on what you said about Libya becoming a free corridor for refugees. And prior to the regime change in Libya, Libya was a kind of a stable country. And so is the case with other kind of regime changes, that occurred in, after Iraq. What do you think is that the root cause for this, the mass immigration to Europe, or is something else? Because previously it was economic refugees trickling down to the European Union. And after this regime change project, that ambitious regime change projects that ensued, that the immigration crisis became worse. And I have, if I can pack in another question, that you were telling that you had a project that you tried to improve investment opportunities in, sub-Saharan Africa, and try to encourage legal migration. And Britain now just trying to exit the Union. The Britain is actually a huge global financial center, which has about 18% of the cross-border lending and 50% of the, 40% of the foreign exchange trade. If Britain exit, the European Union, what would happen to that project that you're going to improve the investment opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa and then encourage, legal migration?
Well, about the future and the balance or the extra budget necessity to work on domestic agenda and on international agenda. The linkage between migration and domestic agenda, one link is demography. It's not very popular to say to the European member states electorate, but the Chancellor Merkel at same extent said the truth. So we European needs in the future migrants just to maintain the population at this level. The population is declining very rapidly. So it's not so easy and not so popular if you want votes tomorrow. But at some extent we need, is a resource for us. Migration is the resource we need for the future for the country. Why I'm saying this? Because we have to consider legal migration on regulated migration and investment for European Union. If we consider it not only a threat for security, but a resource and investment for the future and the prosperity, the future prosperity of the European Union, migration and investment, you have to put money. That's why we say in our migration compact that one option is to have European bonds to fund migration policies, because it's an investment for the European Union future. So this is a proposal. Somewhere else from Germany proposed a small tax on fuel. But the approach that we suggest to have a bond emission at EU level to fund money dedicated to migration policies, in my view, respond to this issue. That migration, of course, in the short term, is a security, or it appears a security issue, and we have to respond to our citizens that fear the not regulated migration. But because it's an investment, and could be an investment, we need to find money, even borrow money, to invest for the future. It's a controversial issue because we are not ready to discuss. Well, we are not ready. We are ready. Not everybody in EU is ready to discuss to have European bonds. But the discussion is gaining attention, and the European Commission the President Juncker sent a letter to my Prime Minister Renzi recognizing that our proposal is a very good base for discussion, and in the proposal, migration, European Union migration bonds is on the paper. Brexit and Ireland, I think that, well, I'm still confident that at the end of the day, UK voters will take the right decision in their own interest, first of all, and they will remain. They will vote stay. And so for next at least 20 years, Brexit won't be on the agenda again. But Ireland is one. The peace in Northern Ireland, of course, is due to the efforts of all the international community, of United States of America, the efforts of Bill Clinton, but is an achievement that was possible thanks to the European Union, because the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland is not anymore a real border, because it's just a sign inside the European Union. Both Northern Ireland and Ireland are European people. In the Northern Ireland and in Ireland share the common European Union citizenship. What is going to happen after Brexit? That again the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland will be a border outside and inside the European Union. So I think that this is one more reason, in my opinion, for United Kingdom voters to vote stay. The regime change in Libya and so on. A United States official said, I don't remember exactly who was, but said, we intervene in Iraq, we put boots on the ground in Iraq, and it was a complete failure. We intervene with high strikes in Libya, we didn't put boots on the ground, and it was a complete failure. In Syria, we didn't intervene at the beginning with air strikes. We didn't put boots on the ground, and it was a complete failure. So it's quite difficult to judge. But what we understand from past experience in Libya is that we need, first of all, empowerment of Libyan people. And the efforts that so far have succeeded in Libya is to help Libyan people to set up their own government. Of course, with the help and recognized by the international community, but we need a government recognized by the Libyan people. And at some extent, now we have. We are waiting that Tobruk authority, former parliamentary authority, will decide to support the government. But it's important to show to the Libyan public opinion, because there is a public opinion in Libya, that this is their own government. Probably in the future, the government will ask Italy, European Union, international community for some help in order to fight against Daesh, in order to fight against human being trafficking. But first of all, they have to be recognized from the Libyan public opinion, from the Libyan people, as their own government.
Okay, I think we have time for one more round of questions, and the first questioner is already there.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Edward Atraji. I'm an aerospace engineer. I agree with you on one thing, and one thing alone, and that is that the European Union must be saved, and it must be supported in every possible way, and eventually it must include also Russia. But this is not my question. You see, terrorism has changed the game. The rules of the game has to change. And I wonder what you would think of boycotting completely Muslim oil, especially Arab Muslim oil, by Europe, by the Western world, and by Russia, until such time as these troubled countries believe that freedom is the most precious thing in life, the freedom of choice to choose one's partner, the freedom to choose one's religion, the freedom to speak one's mind. And until such time, we will not deal with Arab oil and any kind of a product that is manufactured, transported, or contains even traces of that oil. What are your thoughts? Will this change the game?
I'm Gian Lorenzo Cornado, Ambassador of Italy in Ottawa. I have a very long experience here in Canada. I would like to ask you, Senator Della Vedova, something.
Not a difficult one.
In 1995, on the occasion of the referendum on the sovereignty of Quebec, there was a declaration by then President Clinton that U.S. would want to continue to cooperate with a strong and united Canada. On the same time, there was a decisive event on the eve of the referendum. More than 100,000 Canadian citizens went to Montreal, showed their love and attachment to Quebec inside the Federation, inside Canada, and invited Quebecers to vote against sovereignty, against separation. Now, my question is very simple. Do you think that the demonstration support that President Obama is about to make in London for UK remain in the EU might be useful to convince British people to vote against Brexit? And do you think that a similar demonstration of love by European citizens going to London from Paris, from Madrid, from Rome, from Berlin on the referendum to show their attachment to UK remaining in the EU might help to the cause of UK remaining within the European Union? Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Any more? Yes, please.
Thank you. I think we've heard more, Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. We've heard more interesting and intriguing ideas the last little while than in most places, particularly about a bond. A bond without a central bank is an interesting idea. But in any event, that's not the issue. The final thing you said, two things. One is we can't go back. Europe can't go back to the era of your parents, and we know what that all was. I think we've become complacent. We've accepted a Europe that's a cockpit of peace and prosperity, but instead of war. Preceding, you said, and I think it's the crux of the day today, you're optimistic that Europe will hold together. And as part of that earlier, you said, however, that Brexit would possibly change Europe if you accepted the terms. So my real question to you then is, what is the basis for your optimism that Europe will hold together, given the variety of challenges? And incidentally, along the way, will it be the same Europe if, as you also hope, Europe will still have UK as a member?
Thank you very much. So, any last questions? If that's not the case, I think we have plenty of material for you to give one last round of responses.
I start from the last question. Probably I'm optimistic because I'm scared, and I think that many, as I am in Europe, at the end of the day will be scared by the possibility that the European Union will explode. And I think that, of course, the economic crisis matters a lot, of course. Without economic crisis, probably, we had not this kind of discussion that has no rational basis. For instance, some countries from the eastern part of Europe regain freedom, democracy, are more or less, thanks to the EU, are receiving a lot of funds from EU taxpayers, because in the European Union, new accessions for new accessions from countries with average income above the average, the EU budget fund the recovery, the development. So they are receiving a lot of money from European Union. They are benefiting a lot from the single market, but they are claiming against the European Union. But when the finish of this will be at stake, I'm quite confident that before the jump we will think about what are we doing. And in many we will see what will happen, for instance, in the presidential election in France could be a game changer if the Front National will win the presidential election, of course, because till now they say things about the future of European Union I disagree with. We will see what is going to happen. But so to be the concerns about the future and a sort of optimistic view of the future can combine, in my view, because I'm scared. But I think that there are plenty of reasons that at the end of the day will prevail. In Brexit, I hope, and in the future of European Union, because in the meantime, we are discussing how to integrate. In the meantime, European Union is under, politically speaking, is under threat, but we are discussing how to have a single policy on migrations. That is if we will succeed, it will be a great achievement in the interest of the security of each and one European citizen in Germany, in Italy, in France, in England. So it's a puzzled situation, but I'm still confident. But not only because I have to be, because I think that at the end of the day the balance will be in the right position, even in Brexit. And coming to the question of my ambassador, I think that Obama will say the truth, and the truth is that I imagine, in the interest of United States of America, is to have a stronger European Union as a partner in international issues. That is, it's better to have a stronger European Union, that it's complicated from a political point of view partner, than to have 28 member states, big or not big, but everyone going in a different direction. And from an economic point of view, at the end of the day, it's better for U.S. economy to have a stronger partner called European Union, to negotiate agreement, for instance, free trade agreement with the European Union is more complicated, of course, because it's more or less on equal basis, but is more useful for United States of America. And I think that once United Kingdom leave the European Union, is in the interest of United States to show commitment toward European Union, also without UK. And I think that this is one more reason the relationship with United States for United Kingdom to remain in European Union. The United Kingdom influence, being United Kingdom closer ally of United States, the United Kingdom influence worldwide is stronger inside the European Union and through European Union than alone. Probably, Mr. Ambassador, it would be helpful if ordinary European citizens from Paris or from Berlin or from Rome or from Warsaw or from Madrid will demonstrate their love for UK to remain for Britons and for the stay of United Kingdom. Probably not politicians. Because it's too easy for Mr. Farage to say, how did these French politicians, Italian politicians, they want to give order to the UK voters. That it's not true, but so this is the reason, because I think that European politicians must not interfere with the elections. In my opinion, we must be more vocal on what will happen after Brexit. For instance, I think that the access to the single market for UK after Brexit will be difficult. In the case, we will have to renegotiate an agreement with UK, but in the meanwhile, of course, I think that it will be quite difficult to maintain business as usual. And we have to say the UK voters must understand that business as usual after Brexit is a false promise.